Mark Twain once said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." We all have that friend who's quick to tell us how we should be handling our money. You know, the same friend who complains about having to go to a job they hate but can't afford not to. Want to know what happens when we take advice from the wrong people? Keep watching. I'm Papa Charlie. School's in session. The danger doesn't come from the person who knows nothing about money. It comes from the one who knows everything, and everything they know is wrong. The people who shaped what you know for sure about money weren't necessarily your enemies. They were your parents, your friends, your coworkers, your tax preparer. People who genuinely wanted the best for you, operating from the same financial framework the system handed all of us. In this video, we'll continue the story of the vintner and his wife who found themselves living in a paradise, and what happens when they take advice from the wrong person. If you're just joining this journey, you may want to start with episode 1. The link is in the description. When we left the vintner and his wife, they were sitting on the porch of the estate house as the sun went down over the vineyard. The vines were tended, the books were balanced, the scoreboard was growing, and the landowner's private computer sat quietly in the office, untouched, exactly where it belonged. They were blissfully content, two people doing exactly what they were designed to do, for a landowner who not only compensated them well, but genuinely loved them. Life in the vineyard was everything the landowner had promised it would be, until it wasn't. The vintner's wife had a close circle of friends she'd known for years. They met for their monthly ladies' lunch, the kind of lunch that starts with catching up and ends with solving the world's problems. The wife told her friends about the vineyard, about how well things were going, about the landowner's generosity and the business they were building together. She mentioned the office setup, the vineyard computer they used freely, the landowner's private computer they'd been asked to leave alone. One of the friends, an attorney, put down her fork. "How well do you know this man?" she said. The wife smiled. "Well enough. He's been nothing but generous since the day we arrived." The attorney leaned forward. "I'm sure he has. But listen, in my line of work, I've seen this before. A private computer, a wall around it, and no explanation." She paused. "What if he's involved in something that could expose you and your husband to liability? You're running his operation. If something illegal is connected to that property and you don't know about it, that's not a defense. That's a problem." The wife felt something shift inside her. She hadn't considered that. "I'm not saying he's done anything wrong," the attorney said, picking up her fork again. "I'm just saying you have the right to know what you're involved in. That's all." The lunch ended warmly. They hugged goodbye in the parking lot and made plans to do it again next month. But the wife left that lunch with an uneasy feeling she didn't have when she arrived. She didn't say anything to her husband that night. She made dinner. They talked about the vineyard. She listened to him describe a problem he'd solved with one of the older vines and nodded in the right places. But her mind was somewhere else. She found herself thinking about the landowner, about how little she actually knew about him beyond what he'd shown them, about the computer sitting in the office, about what might be on it. He'd been generous, she thought to herself, but now she was wondering why anyone would be so generous. The attorney's words kept coming back. You have the right to know what you're involved in. She thought about everything they'd built, the adjacent property, the lifestyle they were living. He'd even included them in a share of the profits from the operation. What would happen to all of it if the landowner was connected to something they didn't know about? What would happen to them? Over the next few days, the question grew from an uneasy feeling into genuine anxiety. She started looking at the operation differently. The boundary that had felt reasonable when the landowner explained it now felt like a wall between her and something she needed to know. His generosity, which had felt like love, now felt like a distraction, something to keep them comfortable, something to keep them from asking questions. She just had to know what the landowner was hiding in that computer. The next night, as the couple sat on the back porch overlooking their little paradise, she looked at her husband with a pained expression. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. She told him everything, the lunch, the attorney's concern, the liability question. The days she'd spent turning it over in her mind. By the time she finished, she wasn't presenting an argument, she was presenting her fear. And her fear was real. The vintner was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the landowner's computer sitting on the desk beside his own. He thought about the day the landowner had explained the boundary, the tone of it, the reasonableness of it, the man's character across every interaction they'd had since the day they arrived. He knew the boundary, and somewhere underneath his wife's fear, he could feel the weight of what he was being asked to do. But she was scared, and he loved her, and the attorney's argument wasn't unreasonable at face value. What if there was something on that computer that connected them to something they didn't know about? Wouldn't a responsible man want to know? He reached over and took her hand. Let me think about it. He thought about it for 3 days, and on the fourth day, when his wife asked him again, he made a decision. On the fourth day, the vintner came to his wife with something in his hand, a small piece of paper, folded once. He'd found it in the back of the landowner's desk drawer while looking for a pen. I think this might be a password, he said quietly. They looked at each other for a long moment. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. He unfolded it. A single line of characters, the kind of thing a person writes down and tucks away because they're afraid they'll forget it. The kind of thing you leave in a drawer because you trust the people around you completely. The vintner sat down in front of the landowner's computer. His wife stood behind him. He typed in the characters. The screen unlocked. They weren't looking for much, just enough to confirm there was nothing to worry about. A quick scan. Something that would put their minds at ease and let them go back to the life they loved. What they found instead was a legal file. A lawsuit filed against the landowner just over a year before they arrived. Allegations of fraud in a previous business dealing. And at the bottom of that file, a settlement agreement. Confidential. Both parties bound by a non-disclosure agreement. The vintner sat back in his chair. His wife put her hand over her mouth. She called her attorney friend that evening, read her the details over the phone, the allegations, the settlement, the NDA. The attorney was quiet for a moment. An NDA after a settlement usually means someone paid to keep something quiet, she said carefully. I can't tell you what it means without seeing the full file, but I'd be concerned. They didn't sleep well that night. 2 weeks later, the landowner came to the vineyard for his quarterly review. It was a visit they had always looked forward to. The landowner would walk the property with the vintner, review the books with his wife, share a meal at the estate house, and leave them feeling encouraged and valued. This time was different. Something in the couple's manner had changed, and the landowner noticed it immediately. The vintner's wife opened the review with the numbers. Strong season, the adjacent property producing ahead of schedule. The projections for the following year were the best they'd prepared since arriving. Then the vintner cleared his throat. We want to talk to you about something, he said, and we hope you'll understand that we're asking out of concern, for ourselves, for our future here. The landowner waited. We've heard that there may have been some legal trouble in a previous venture, a settlement. We just want to make sure that whatever that involved isn't connected to this operation, that we're not exposed to anything we don't know about. The room went very quiet. The landowner looked at the vintner for a long moment, then at his wife, then back at the vintner. Who told you about that? He asked quietly. The vintner glanced at his wife. Did you look in my private computer, which I told you was off limits? The landowner set down his pen. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't push back from the table. He simply looked at them both with an expression that was equal parts sorrow and clarity, the look of a man who had just understood something he didn't want to understand. The lawsuit was filed against me by a former business partner who misrepresented his own role in the venture, he said. The settlement was in my favor. I won. He paid me. The NDA was part of the settlement. I signed the agreement because my attorneys advised it, and because I had no interest in further damaging the reputation of a man who had already lost. He paused. The terms of the settlement are on the same computer, in the same file, on the last page. The vintner looked at his wife. They hadn't turned the page. I'm not angry with you, the landowner said. He meant it. There was no malice in his voice, no edge underneath the grace. But trust has been damaged, and I can't leave you in charge of my investment and my privacy. He stood up from the table. I'll arrange for a transition. You'll be fairly compensated for your time and for what you've built here. He picked up his pen and his folder. I hope one day you'll understand why that boundary was there. And then he left. The couple sat at the table for a long time after his car disappeared down the vineyard road, the landowner's computer dark and closed on the desk. They had the answer they went looking for, and it cost them everything they had. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. There's an important lesson in the story of the vintner and his wife. The boundary set over that computer wasn't designed to control them. It wasn't designed to keep them in the dark. It was designed to protect the couple's relationship with the one who gave them the opportunity for success. Some boundaries are set for privacy. The owner had information about his broader financial picture that simply wasn't the couple's business to know. Some boundaries are set for protection. The couple didn't have the legal expertise, the business context, or the full picture to interpret what was on that computer correctly. The boundary was protecting them from exactly the kind of conclusion they drew when they found half of a story and filled in the rest with fear. Financial success is not the result of knowing everything. It's the result of faithfully operating within the boundaries set by the one who does. Psalm 50:10 tells us that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, every asset, every resource, every opportunity. The vintner and his wife were managing something that belonged to someone else. They forgot that. And the moment they forgot it, the moment they decided their right to know was greater than the boundary the owner set, they lost everything they'd been entrusted with. The most dangerous financial advice you will ever receive will likely come from the people who claim to have your best interest in mind. These are people who believe that they know the difference between what is financially good and what is evil. They will present what seem to be reasonable arguments based upon what they believe. But here's the rub. They don't know any more than you do. In fact, they probably know less than you do. I call this attitude confident ignorance. The only antidote for confident ignorance is financial truth. And financial truth begins with the Word of God. Next week, we'll find out what became of the vintner and his wife. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'm Papa Charlie. Class dismissed.